Rabbi Adam is with me from the Sam Synagogue here in St Albans. Good morning, Rabbi Adam.
Good morning, John. Thank you for having me on.
Lovely to speak to you. And here we are then, Sunday morning, the 13th of December, slap bang in the middle of Hanukkah. And I was just interested to find out this morning, really, what is Hanukkah and how are the people here in St Albans celebrating it?
Sure. Well, Hanukkah is actually a pretty minor holiday in Jewish custom, which is surprising to a lot of people because for most people who don't know or aren't Jewish or don't know a great deal about it, they see a lot about Hanukkah. They see maybe a menorah or a Chanukah in a shop window, that's the candelabra, or they see cards in the store around this time of year, and it makes it seem like Hanukkah is actually a really big deal. But religiously, it's quite a minor holiday. We have lots and lots of them, and Hanukkah is one of them. But the reason it's become such a big deal is because of the season and because of the influence of Christmas, and in some way it's gotten bigged up a little bit to try and compete with Christmas, which is silly, but also quite fun. So Hanukkah, like most of our holidays, is historical. It celebrates the military victory a long time ago.
Right, okay. And it's linked, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned sort of that sort of funny competition with Christmas. And of course we have Diwali, which has been earlier a few weeks back. And they're celebrations of light as well. So they do have that kind of theme linked in, don't they?
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense at this time of year to do something and to remember something which is connected to light. And for us, it's tangentially related to this kind of historical event, but also the symbolism of slowly growing in life for 8 days, a little bit more and more and more, is itself just as important as the historical background.
Right. And so what will, I mean, you mentioned the Hanukkahs and sort of menorahs, the candelabras. What will people be doing then within the Jewish community to sort of mark Hanukkah?
Well, Hanukkah is a fairly at-home holiday compared to some. It's not one we do much in the synagogue for. And unlike many Jewish holidays, there's no restrictions on work. So actually, it's really easy to do even in these times because most people would do it at home with their families anyway. And most people don't do a great deal. Actually, it's quite small. What you do is you light the menorah. There's a special menorah, which is a candelabra, which you light during Hanukkah. And for every night, for 8 nights, and gradually until it's completely full. And you kind of remember the historical event that's behind it, the military victory, the surprise win, and you eat lots of wonderful fried food, not very good for you, but very tasty. Yeah. And for many people, it's just a time to celebrate and gather with family and, indulge themselves a little bit in the middle of winter.
And I think one of the wonderful things about the Jewish faith and culture and religion is really the emphasis on family. And so this is just another aspect of that, is it, with a family to get together?
Yeah, absolutely. It's gathering around the Chanukah and lighting it and eating together and singing together and playing games and just being a bit silly. It's one of our more lighthearted holidays, despite its actual origin. And as a result, it's really good for kids and for families and a good thing in the otherwise quite barren time of year.
Indeed. Now, as we approach Christmas within the Christian calendar, obviously from a Jewish belief point of view, Christmas doesn't hold, from a religious point of view, doesn't hold that any importance. But as a period, as a kind of season, is it still something that living in a sort of a more secular community that the Jewish faith, I don't know, acknowledge, or I mean, what's kind of like the position on it when it comes to Christmas?
There's really no position. I mean, Christmas is a Christian holiday, obviously, and unlike some Christian holidays, say Easter, which has at least some echoes in Christians' basis in Judaism, Christmas doesn't, but it has no connection to Hanukkah, even though actually the early Christians would have celebrated Hanukkah.
Right.
There's no link necessarily to it.
Right.
And so for most Jews today, Christmas, I mean, the Christmas season is wonderful, right? I love mince pies and the lights and the music just as much as anyone. But the religious aspect of Christmas or the celebration of the season, it's really just something that doesn't even radar for most people.
Of course. I mean, as a lot of people say now, it's sort of season of goodwill and peace, goodwill to all men, isn't it, really? So that whole aspect of acknowledging everybody. Now, over the course of the last few weeks with lockdown 2, I remember speaking to you back in March, and obviously the synagogue had shut down. what has been the position with the Maserati synagogue? Have you been worshipping at home again, or how is it? How has it panned out for you?
Yeah, well, obviously with the lockdown measures back in place, we can't gather on Shabbat as we normally would. So we're doing lots of other things and trying to reach people online as much as possible. But actually, one thing for us as a quite traditional synagogue is that we don't use technology on Shabbat. So we can't replicate our normal Shabbat service on Saturday morning by doing it online. And that means that actually people have had to do it at home or just think differently about what it means to observe Shabbat, spend more time with family or figure out ways to adapt it to their own home life, which is good. But also, I think we're all looking forward to being able to gather back again in person at the synagogue.
Yeah, of course, everyone coming together, which is so important. I remember you saying this to me back in March and April when we spoke about, obviously, lots of churches and mosques are using technology to stream their services and bring people together. But because of the whole idea that you cannot work on Shabbat and operate machinery, so there is that emphasis really on the individuals and the families themselves to create the worship. Is that right then?
Yeah, absolutely. And making it a day of rest is always a challenge. I think it's a different challenge in lockdown to set aside a day which is going to be different, in which you're not going to do the things you're doing, especially if you're working from home. Being at home for a day doesn't feel like quite as much rest. Yeah. So it's always a challenge, I think, for people to be thoughtful about what it means to take a day off from their normal occupations, whatever that looks like. And it's somewhat more challenging when people are doing it on their own as opposed to relying on the synagogue community. But it also could be really creative, and it provokes people to think differently about it. And hopefully when we're able to get back to quote-unquote normal and come back to the synagogue, people have had a more profound experience of Shabbat at home. And some things, like Hanukkah, actually we can do online. Right? That's a good example of something that isn't limited by technology, and we can, join together to light the menorah in lots of homes at once on Zoom, and we can, share recipes and do cooking classes and all the things that actually make it a bit more of a community endeavor. For something like Hanukkah, we can do that.
Excellent. Well, that's fantastic. Listen, thank you ever so much for filling us in and letting us know what's going on. And I hope you and your family and the community as well have a wonderful Hanukkah. And it'll be wonderful to catch up and speak with you if that so-called normal returns in 2021. So, Rabbi Adam, thank you ever so much for your time.
It's a pleasure as always. Thank you.